Okay, welcome to my top 10 strategies in these difficult times. It's Grant Abbott from Like Your Docs, and also I love SMSF. And you will be getting a CPD point from this session, which will be great for those of you who need it. Although I dare say that the 40 CPD hours required by FASEA for 30 June are probably well and truly going out the window. You can see there on that beautiful picture there is the first three justices of the High Court. Really, it's amazing where we are going and where we've been over the last few days, and particularly the last few weeks. Sorry about it, I've got John there. I don't know, that was a bit of a mistake. But we've been through quite a lot. And really, where we are now with 50 deaths in Australia and so many people who have actually found the coronavirus, and I'm sure there's tens of thousands or more who've probably had it and recovered from it. The question is whether the quarantining and shutting the economy down is going to be worth more than the pain of the coronavirus. Certainly, I live up in Queensland, and the shutting of the borders to prevent people from New South Wales and in fact everywhere in Australia coming into Queensland, if you have a look at it from my perspective, is illegal. We are living in historical times, and we will get through this, absolutely. But certainly our individual and our business freedoms are being trampled on. Notwithstanding public health, but if I want to drive down to Sydney and do a seminar, and I do all my appropriate measures of my gloves and my masks and plenty of social distancing, as I did for our recent two-day succession asset protection estate planning conference up in Sunshine Coast here, then essentially I should be allowed to do that. But obviously I can't even get past the border, or I've got to be quarantined. Now, the thing is, what we're going to come out of this, and I absolutely guarantee you, there's going to be at least 50 years of litigation will arise out of these measures. I mean, even the basic one, the absolute basic one, is the Constitution. It looks as though all our constitutional rights are essentially being trampled on. For example, since 1900, when we first had the Constitution, there's been hundreds of cases on trade. And when they quarantined, the first thing I said to our team was, that's illegal. Section 92 of the Constitution provides that trade, commerce and intercourse among the states, whether by means of internal carriage or ocean navigation, shall be absolutely free. And as I said, there's lots of cases on that. Whether it's going to come down the track, I'm not sure. But suddenly we've given local councils, we've given the police, even lifesavers, we've given everyone these rights. From my perspective, when we have a look at it, the whole will potentially be in a recession unless we get a V-shaped bounce. Potentially, we're going to be in a recession. We're going to be maybe even a depression for some time to come. Now, I'm an optimist by nature anyway, but like anything, there's a crisis, and of course there's going to be a silver lining. If anyone's going to find it, it's going to be me. But like anything is that we can't look in the mirror and say, well, let's go back to the good old days, which is February. That we can't go back to the good old days. We actually have to deal with what's right in front of us and basically be a rock for our families and clients. I was watching the news this morning, and YouGov did a survey of Australians, although I don't think they're very good at surveys, but they did a survey and showed that 78% of Australians have severe stress at the moment. 48% are concerned about losing their home, not being able to provide food for the family. And that means that there's going to be serious illness, anxiety, mental health, depression potentially. And I'm sure many of you have seen that with your clients and potentially felt it yourself. I can feel this heaviness that is weighing down on us at the moment. And effectively being jailed in my home certainly doesn't help. I mean, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, it's not a bad thing, but after a while, it does get very, very depressing. And I don't even have kids. I've got a couple of dogs, But I do have a couple of parents who are in an aged care home in South Australia, which I can't go and visit. So it's absolutely crazy where we're at the moment. And again, you know, if we look after our elderly and those people who've been, you know, got immune problems, which seems to be the case with COVID-19, then we need to have some sensible arrangements. But it looks as though everyone's throwing it up on the fly. Now, from my perspective, again, I've been through some tough times in my career, I can tell you. And look, I've been very open and honest about that. Not so much in my career. My career's always been the one thing I can always fall back on. But personally, I've had, you know, some divorces and some issues around that. It's been tough. But my professional career and passion have carried me through. And I would say to you, whether you're an accountant or a financial planner, that at this present point in time, what we can offer to Australia is absolutely crucial. It's time for us to be a rock and come and start hitting this coronavirus head on with strategies, ideas, knowledge, and make sure we get through this. We're so lucky that we're in that space of being able to offer our clients good news in times of darkness. So when the times are tough, that we are helping them. 48% of people worrying about losing their house, get in and make sure that you're negotiating on their behalf. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we all know numbers. We know the market goes up and down. We've seen that. It's surprising that the US market goes down and up. But when you throw $6 trillion into the market, there's no doubt that, you know, a lot of people are going to be making money and getting loans at very low rates. One thing we know from the numbers is that don't expect interest rates to rise for a long time. More importantly, don't expect inflation to rise for a long time because we've cut out a huge amount of consumer demand. And at the back of everyone's mind is, well, how do we know that next year there's not going to be a monkey virus or this is a bat virus, a monkey virus or a pig virus, or remember the swine flu was just around. Just seems that this one, they've taken a pretty radical action of quarantine. The next time you're not going to be able to print so much money. So we're living in history, but, you know, we're going through a bit of a winter now. It's been a huge storm. A tornado has come down and wreaked its havoc across the Australian economy. But again, we know that in winter, now's the time to get those strategies, belt them down, because that change merchant, you know, that idea that some people don't want to change, we've got no choice but to change at this time. Spring will return, so it's time to get our soil ready and make sure that we make the most after it, because after spring comes harvest. And if you go back to the Depression in the 1929s and 30s, more millionaires were made at that time, and people started up new businesses. The fact now that, look at Zoom, I've been using it for 3 or 4 years. I'm using it now. It's an amazing system, but look at how their shares have popped up compared to other ones. I saw Apple's come out with a very cheap Apple iPhone. People are just really hanging on by the skin of their fingers. So it's time that things are going to change. Working from home is certainly going to create its own issues, but that's then going to have a ripple effect across everyone. But the main things we're in this together. You know, feel free to hit me up with ideas or strategies when your clients get in tough times. Let's work through them and see what we can do. Okay, strategy 1, 20K super withdrawal. You see a little bit about this. I mean, you can go onto the ATO website and register, and I think they've got something like about 700,000 to 800,000 people who've already registered. The 20K super withdrawal, again, we're not sure. Look, I'm not sure. There's 2 grounds sitting inside the SIS regulations, which effectively allow us to access super under financial hardship or compassionate grounds. I originally thought it'd be under financial hardship because generally under financial hardship, it's you can take out a certain amount of money, but we could end up at compassionate grounds because that's looked after by the regulator. It really doesn't matter. Either way, I'd love to see the regulations, but seeing that it starts next week, I just think they're going to be doing this on the fly. And really, there is one small mechanism for doing that under Section 62 of the sole purpose test. But again, in these sort of circumstances, it's money for broke. Now, when you're able to access your super at age 25, 35, 45, or even 50, we've been told for so long you can't access your super. It's grown into our brain. In fact, many of you probably aware promoters of early access schemes have been imprisoned. So being able to access your super is essentially too good to be true. Picking up from the ATO website, again, there's no legislation, so we can just go on what the ATO does. But as the ATO is the party that's actually going to send release documents to superannuation funds, you just leave it up to the ATO. If they say it's good enough to go, then it's good enough to go. The key features there is that if you taking benefits from Centrelink, such as job seeker, you're unemployed, you've got a family parenting an amount, all of those ones fit the bill of being able to access. If you've been made redundant from the 1st of July 2020, but your hours are down 20%, so that's going to be job protector, but there's so many companies around Australia that have gone to 2, 3, 4 day weeks. Well, my guess, and look, I'm going to be pretty gutsy here, and my guess is there's potentially up to around about 9 million people who effectively could be impacted here. You could potentially get that super. So you've seen, obviously, the industry funds are out there. You know, don't take your money out because you're gonna have a lot more money down the track. Well, that's just a lot of crap. You can't prove that whatsoever. In fact, if you don't take your money out now, who's to know that your current underlying balance or your assets that they've got in there aren't going to drop down by another 20% or 30% anyway. Particularly some of those unlisted assets they've got, they're very slow to revalue them. They have come out and said, well, hold on now, super fund trustees don't allow you to take that money out. Well, yeah, again, that's not going to wash over that because the ATO is going to come in pretty hard on that one. Now, if you're a federal politician, that's completely different because you've got money out of consolidated revenue. I reckon about 9 million people are going to be able to access their super. And if we saw that, and look, it could be more because there's 16 million people who are currently employed in Australia, because it also includes sole workers or people who are basically engaged as a sole trader. So when we have a look at that, we could be up around about the 10 or the 12 million people. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a big campaign or it's going to get out, or is it just going to be washed over? People aren't really aware of it. My feeling is that the Channel 9s, the Channel 7s, everyone's going to be out there. Certainly on Facebook, there's going to be a lot of issues there. As you can imagine, ASIC is probably already going out and saying, look, to real estate agents are saying, quick, dip in your super and pay your rent or pay your mortgage. Well, that's not going to happen. But certainly for anyone who can take their 20K out, why not take it out and then effectively, even if you don't need it, hold it, and there you go, bingo, bango, bongo. You're going to have a deposit if there's a couple there for a house when the market turns around. Again, if you're in a good, well-paid job that carries through this, then the banks are going to be loving you. And if you've got a good deposit, why not take it out while you can? Because always the big issue is, how can we access our super to provide a deposit for the family home? Remember they had that joke one where you could put $3,000, which was an absolute joke. Here you've got it laid out on a beautiful silver plate for you, so make sure you take it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime gift. Don't expect to see what happens. Again, as I said, look, the industry funds will say, well, hold on, you're going to be $120,000 down or a couple of $100,000. In fact, I just dealt with someone last week. It's one of my wife's friends who'd been targeted by a cold callers saying that you should switch your super and effectively you're going to be $1 million better off if you come out of the current balance fund options. Now, I didn't think that was illegal anyway. I told them that. But look, take the 20K out. It's also important for us, not only directly, but also our clients, because a lot of our clients' children are probably falling on hard times. And essentially it means the client has to look after their family. As I said, it's putting food on the table for the family. So anything there can help at the long run. And look, you're going to make it up over a period of time. As I said before, you could be in a position of the money staying in and then effectively finding it drops off. For a tax agent, I won't go into you. I will send Mark Trimmer, how do I identify whether the fund will allow all of the super to be withdrawn? I have a 25-year-old who has 15K in super, has suffered loss of income, at least 20%, is getting married. We moved to New Zealand. Absolutely. So you'll be able to get that out. Mark, with that one, if they've got 15K in super, my daughter's got 7,800 in super. She's taking the whole thing out. She tried to put it on me. She said, I'd love to get the 10,000 out, until she worked out she's only got 7,800. So he will be able to take that money out. Tax consequences, if you go and have a look at the ATO website, there are no tax consequences. So unlike all the other ways we get condition of release, where generally there are tax consequences, it's tax-free, which actually has a bigger bonus there. Take the money out and put it in as a tax-deductible contribution doesn't make sense to me. Just take it out, leave it out, because we don't know what's around the corner. So why doesn't advisor still need to do an ROA, but a tax agent doesn't? Just simply the way it is, because the tax agents actually have a specific exemption under the Corporations Act. ASIC's done quite extensive guidelines on the exemptions for tax agents. In fact, tax agents can talk to clients about contributions. They can talk to clients about self-managed super funds. And particularly one of the issues here, though, is the difference is a financial advisor or someone who's licensed can go and recommend to a client, can go out and put pages on Facebook saying, look, take your money out, blah, blah, blah. I can help facilitate it, whereas an accountant or a tax agent can't. But if a client comes to them and says, look, what can I do? Or a father comes and says, look, my daughter wants to take it out, you can then discuss the tax consequences around it and help facilitate that process. Bearing in mind, the facilitation of the process is just simply jumping onto the ATO website, telling them where the money is, putting it in there. Then effectively the tax office does everything else essentially for you. What I will do is, Nigel's quite good. JobKeeper, Chris, that's a really good point with JobKeeper. Generally, I'm assuming most people like my daughter on JobKeeper aren't working anyway. So they're still employed, but it's a loss of hours, not loss of income, which is important. So have a look at the ATO website on accessing your super. Just go COVID accessing your super. Again, Nigel, if you take too much insurance out, just watch out. But remember, a lot of these small balances, it's an opt-in scheme anyway now. Anyway, that's strategy one. I've got 9 to go and I've got 30, 40 minutes to do it. Strategy 2, borrow from your super. Now, I know this sounds weird, but don't blow me away from this one. Section 65 of CISA prevents lending to members of a superannuation fund and also their relatives, but it doesn't prevent your SMSF lending to related parties, including discretionary trusts and also companies. Now, there is a 5% limit. So let's say we've got John Smith, who's got $2 million in super. He's age 64, he's got a pension. His wife is age 63, and she's got $1 million. So the fund's worth $3 million. They've got a son, Matthew, who's inside the superannuation fund. He's got like $30,000, which he's going to take out the $20,000 anyway under the early release scheme as a consequence of COVID-19. That $3 million effectively a loan can be made to Matthew's business. Now, it can't be made to Matthew directly, but if Matthew's got a family trust, a discretionary trust, or a company, it can be made. But obviously the terms and conditions have to be commercial. But given it's a small business loan, then they're pretty easy to find. It doesn't have to be for small business. It can actually just be for investments. If he's got an investment trust or a property trust, he can lend to that. Now, what it'll be, though, it is classified as an in-house asset, so you need to check the 5% rule. So if I have a look at that from that perspective, if there's $3 million in there, then there's $150,000 which can be lent from that fund. The 5% test is made at the 30th of June 2020 this year. So again, it's a good way for parents or grandparents to help out their children by way of a borrowing, and I'm going to cover this a little bit later on. Matt Salisbury, can you put, say, $25,000 of super tomorrow, claim the deduction, pay the contributions tax, and pull out the $20,000 before the end of the June? The $20,000 is staged, so it's $10,000 starting from the 20th of April and up to 30 June, and then post 30 June, you can take out another $20,000. So look, with the $25,000 then going to deduction, look, you could salary sacrifice that in and then take out the $20,000 later on, or you can do the reverse way. Look, commissioners made a couple of noises around that, but again, look, you just got to, the issue you got to look at is there's no sole purpose test issue. It's going to be a potential tax avoidance issue, and I would say that look, it's going to be a difficult one for it to get around. But I know a lot of people are doing it. I'd probably just go and make sure that there's no Part 4A issues there. So I'm just being pretty circumspect on that one, because I think it's better to get out of it. Chris, could be an issue if the value of the fund drops with 5%. Absolutely. So you just got to watch out that 5%, the loan. So each year you'll market to market. You'll do your 30 June. What happens, Chris, is it's not a bad thing, because let's say that we've put it in now, $3 million. The market's tanked again. We've had another COVID panic, and it's dropped down to $2 million. So I've lent 150 out, so it means I've got $50,000 excess, if that makes sense, because the only amount I can have at 30 June 2020 is 5% of 2 million, which is going to be $100,000, but I've lent out 150. So what it means is by the end of next year, so that's 30 June 2021, I have to repay that $50,000 to take it back to $100,000. That's that excess amount. So it's not a bad process. In fact, you can, as long as there's 5% at the time, you don't go above the 5%. If it drops down, then you can adjust it. And because it's a loan, it's very easy. Can you imagine if it was just like property or one asset? That would be a terrible one. Dave Rutherford, is advice required to do an SMSF loan? Generally, it would, Dave, that's a really good question, because what's happening is the SMSF is lending or getting into an investment strategy. So for I know you use our documentation, so you would actually go into our investment strategy. I'd be doing a custom asset at the end. Remember, that's that last class. I'd be doing a related party loan, put in the terms and conditions, what the benchmark is. Again, going back to the issue before, I think it was Chris, where the market goes up and down, then basically we can have that process there. So recommending them to go into a loan, I would say, if you're a tax agent, I would say you're probably going okay. If you're a planner, you may well have to do an SOA around that one. Okay, cool. So trucks allowed through the border, free trade. Okay, so yeah, good. John, thank you very much for your constitution issue there as well, on trucks, etc. But it'll be interesting to see where we end up with that one. So strategy 2, strategy 3, TRIS maximizer. Unfortunately, everyone treats, it's like the old days when we had a TRIS, it was on the pension side, so we just set and forget it, maybe turn it into an account-based pension at some stage. But look, I've seen people with TRISs up to age 67 and 70, believe it or not, because they just took the money out. There wasn't that much difference between an ABP. But, from the 1st of July 2017, the TRIS actually comes out of the accumulation account. Now, when we have a look at that, we tend to, in the past, we've used a set and forget strategy, as I said, until we got the ABP. But because it comes out of the accumulation account, then if you've got a client who's in the TRIS now, again, think about if they need the 20K, then, which is 10 now and 10 post 1st of July under the government's early release scheme. Alternatively, if they can't do that because they're still employed, they can't show that 20 hours reduction there in hours. Remember, it's not actually income; it's 20 hours reduction. Sole traders, you actually have to show 20% in loss and turnover. So that's the difference between, for example, individuals and sole traders. Then what we can do is, if we've got a TRIS already, we started it earlier this year, or was around on the 1st of July. If we cease the TRIS now, we've taken out our 10%, then what happens is that we're terminating the TRIS, which is a commutation. Now, we can't commute and take a lump sum and take it out of the system because it's a TRIS. We need to actually put it back into the accumulation account. We call it a foldback. And with that foldback, essentially, we can then start another TRIS. Let's say it's on the 1st of May. And if we start another TRIS on the 1st of May, then we can take another 10% out at that time, because essentially TRIS works on the 10% rule, works on every time we commence a new pension. or new tris, or when we start at the 1st of July. So again, all of those documents, the foldback and the recommencement of a tris, are available, as are the SMSF loan agreement. So you'll find we've actually got a special purpose SMSF loan agreement there. Rent reduction, absolutely crucial. This is the number one for all of us here. Absolutely important. I've gone to my landlord. I'm just renting up here on the Sunshine Coast, and just said, look, bang, this is my position. I've done you'll find on our site for $99, there's a COVID rental reduction agreement, which can be used for residential, commercial, industrial, or rural. I've sent them in an agreement, said this is what I'd like to do is reduce my rent by half over the next 6 months. And you can work out to 30 June 2021, have that rent reduction agreement as per the government's guidelines. Then what will happen is we go out for that period of time, and then what I'll do is for the remainder of the lease, I'll seek to repay it. Again, that will then go out to the landlord, and we'll see there'll be a bit of argy-bargy, but you'll see there'll be quite a bit there. What I'll do is I'll send the recording for this, I'll send the slides out as well, and also send out some videos that I've done around some of these issues if you want to go for a deep dive there as well. But currently there's 90,000 SMSFs, at least business real property, back to related parties. So we've got, particularly if it's business real property, you'll find in our rental reduction agreement that we've got the government's charter there for commercial leases. All fits in there, all works out really well. Follow the charter, and I'd be getting on top of it, particularly if it's between the two parties. Just follow what the government's got, and then you haven't got any real issues around the whole process. Now, in terms of loans, where related party loans, look, I would say that, you know, the government will come out with something shortly, but look, I don't think that already the tax office said, look, they're going to turn a blind eye up to 30 June 2021 in terms of rental reduction agreements between related parties. I would say they were going to do exactly the same with loans. So I'm pretty comfortable on that one. You'll find that we've actually built a code for commercial into our rental reduction agreements. But if you've got your residential or rural, rural will be the case, but if you've got residential, that won't pop up. So then it's just a matter of negotiating. But again, get involved. I'm seeing so many landlords giving away rental reductions with nothing in writing, which means effectively it's really null and void. It's crazy. You need to have a really good rental reduction agreement. We're the only ones who've got it. So get out, use it for all your clients. For those of you accountants, you've got, you know, think of all the landlords that are getting screamed at now by their tenants looking for a rental reduction. Get it down in writing, so at least you know what's coming down the track, particularly for commercial and also residential. Enduring powers of attorney, absolutely crucial. What happens if you're quarantined, you're locked somewhere, you can't do anything? We've only done one recently, an advisor where there's an EPOA at clients over in India, can you believe it? And they were over in India and they're locked down there, so they need to do an EPOA for someone to run their business here in Australia. Now, in terms of witnessing and all that sort of stuff, I know the Law Institute of Victoria put out a big screed on what needs for witnessing. All that was bloody unhelpful. I mean, it's hopeless. Can you imagine lawyers? Everyone else is adjusting things on the go, but lawyers still want to be stuck back in the dark ages. In fact, they talked about trustees need to be on paper or vellum. What the hell vellum is, I don't know. Anyway, it sounds like a prophylactic. But anyway, look, you do what you need to do. And certainly, I certainly know in New South Wales, they've come to the party with electronic or digital signatures. My preference is always to get a wet signature, but, you know, if someone's overseas, you need things done, then basically you need to have that case. Now, you generally find EPOAs, you need to do it for everyone who is over 18 in the family. Classic case is if a child's sick and wants to get Centrelink or make an application to the tax office to release, remember the 10,000 before 30 June and afterwards, but they're sick, their parents can't do it, no one can do it. Anyone who's tried to get through the system, the government system, without an EPOA, for example, in aged care, which I've tried, you don't even get past the first hurdle unless the EPOA is on file, and then they'll send you something out which takes 2 weeks. Anyway, you don't want to do that. Get your EPOA, absolutely crucial at the moment. Not only going down, but also up. Everyone in the family needs an EPOA. So from that perspective, the danger is though that an EPOAs generally talk about a personal and also financial, but they're pretty weak because any good lawyer is going to tell you an EPOA can't, you might say in there it's going to make a person a trustee. They can't override a family trust. They don't have an impact on trust and certainly don't have an impact on trust on companies. What we've done for our enduring powers of attorney at Lightyear Docs, we've got some special purpose documentation on the EPOA where if you have an EPOA, if the director of a corporate trustee is sick or the trustee, they're automatically replaced by your EPOA. It's actually done through the company rather down at the EPOA level. But again, you need to have that specifically enforced in the EPOA. And likewise, if you're a single director business company, then if something happens, you get sick, what happens to it? You'll find that you can end up with the business being locked down and no one can move because you're crook. So again, you need to put in place an alternate director, which can come through your EPOA. So we build both of those into our EPOA. So just make sure with that one. Chris, vellum is animal skin-based writing material. Yep. That's one of our new inventions at Lightyear Docs. We're going to make everything in vellum. Can you believe that? The rubbish some of the lawyers put out. But anyway, so let's go through and have a look at strategy number 5, and that is going to be wills. I've been hit up, and I know many of our Lightyear Docs users. We've got on our site, I'll send you through a couple of links, but we've got letters there to go to clients around coronavirus, around the importance of wills and EPOAs, not only for themselves, but also for all of their families. And that has an attached data capture. So out of the data capture, you'll be able to do an EPOA, particularly around if you're aware of their companies in their SMSFs, you'll be able to cover that. But also in terms of wills, you'll be able to do their will. Now, if it's just straight out from the data capture, if you're transferring from the data capture over to the will, then sending it to the client for sending it to them in draft, then that's not the provision of a legal service. If it's going to be quite a potentially one that's going to be challenged on the Family Provisions Act or whatever, then effectively you may well want to use Tony Anamoulis from Abbott-Family, our legal firm, who can come in and sign off through a Zoom meeting for that one. So I'll leave that with you, but again, I'll send through a really good webinar I did on what you can and cannot do for an accountant or a planner in terms of wills, enduring powers of attorney, in terms of advice on self-managed super funds, superannuation, so on and so forth. Again, have a look through that. You can basically cover a lot of those sort of issues. So with okay, so I'll have to have a look at that one. So Sally, a tax agent still needs to do an ROA, but I'll have a look at that one. So leave that with me, that one. So no doubt Sally's always picking me up on that stuff, a record of advice. But a record of advice is not a significant one, but let me come back on that one, if it's licensed or not. So I'll give you a call, Sal, on that one, and we can chew the fat on it. SMSF wills. Forget the will. This is super. So when you're actually looking at superannuation, it sits quite apart from the will. The last place you want your superannuation to go to is effectively in your will. If we have a look at the case of Andre Taylor, this was over in Perth a couple of years ago now, and Andre Taylor died. It was, I think, in around about 2012, 2013, left one house, left that to his 2 children. And of course, he had a de facto for 14 years, Angela Miller, and she made a claim under the West Australian Succession Act or the Family Provisions Act. And 5 years later, it ended up in court. Of the $600,000, she was awarded $240,000, except at the end of the day, legal fees, which had to be paid by the estate prior to any distribution of any family provisions, the legal fees were up at $500,000. So the family provisions claims aren't bad. The problem is most of it's going to lawyers. It actually should be looked at the Lawyers Enrichment Act. Now, the last thing we want to do is put our super over there, because then it really makes a major issue there for us. Best to keep super inside our superannuation fund. Now, generally, we can't keep it in unless it's, for example, a reversionary pension for our spouse. So reversionary pensions do a certain amount there, and they can last for multi-generations. So there's a lot of protection there for them. Just have to watch out for the notional estate in New South Wales, which I believe is completely unconstitutional again. So I'm sure that'll be coming up at some point in time. But we can pay out lump sums, and they can come out in specie. You just got to be really careful if you pay out an in specie death benefit to a adult child, then they can't use the 17% tax rate. However, if it goes out to a child directly, obviously it's not impacted by the family provisions legislation. And I have found a couple of nice little areas, the SMSF Death Benefits Trust, which is like a family protection trust that is built by the trustee of the SMSF and not the deceased estate. It looks as though it is akin to a testamentary trust, where it's got very favourable tax advantages for children flowing out of there who are the beneficiaries. So again, I prefer to do everything underneath the superannuation, plus it's also guided by the Commonwealth legislation rather than the state-based legislation. Strategy 7, asset protection. Look, if your business is bad at the moment, it's going to go down. It doesn't matter what we do in terms of asset protection. For example, if we've got spare cash, if we put it into super, unfortunately, if it's in a bad position, then our trustee in bankruptcy, and I can imagine there's going to be lots of insolvency and trustee in bankruptcy work, which I haven't put up as one of the strategies here for accountants. Effectively, what will happen is that will be able to be clawed back for a period of up to 2 years. Likewise, if there's been a transaction which hasn't had full market value, potentially again, if it's a related party, can be clawed back for up to 5 years. So it is what it is. But for those of you who've got clients who have got a good business, look, none of us can say that we're not going to be litigated against somewhere down the track, whether it's in the future or just something we do wrong from this current state. I know they've gone out and they've talked about fair work, etc. I've been caught up in fair work before, and it's an absolute disaster. And although they say now that fair work is going to be exempted and stuff like that, you can't guarantee anything going down the track. So, from that perspective, we want to shield equity, and we don't know. The good thing also about shielding equity that's in our personal name, we've got a position there. Actually, I'll come back to that, Matt. That's a really good one. We've got a position there that we can shield equity from our personal names, our family trusts, our companies. We put it all into a family protection trust. Now, we're just transferring the equity. We still have full use of the assets, the goodwill, the businesses, etc. What we're doing is we're just simply taking the equity out with no CGT or stamp duty consequences. We call it the protector. Again, you can just go onto our site, go into the strategy centre, and you'll find all these videos are there. So that to me is a great one to use now. As I said before, the protector, if we've taken all our personal assets, the equity in our personal assets, although we hold them in our own name, when we pass away, there's effectively the executor will be able to go through the list of assets, but then find that there's a loan owing to this family protection trust, which if it's the same value as all of our estate, then effectively the executor will have a very easy job because there's nothing to disperse from that perspective. Okay, next one, buy-sell option agreements. I did a webinar on that one this morning. Obviously, we've got a position now that probably a lot of clients or businesses that are going tough. We might find one partner is either in a poor position in terms of incapacity or maybe even going down that really stressful time. And look, to be brutally honest, I think we're all probably pretty well aware that the 50 cases that have been seen in Australia, mainly from a lot of older people, are going to pale into insignificance from the stress, the other diseases potentially that may be created from stress-related diseases. So for those of you who've got clients who are in businesses and don't have buy-sells, it's absolutely crucial to get that up and running and put that buy-sell agreement in place. You need to obviously make sure you've got your constitution strong and constitution covers death, etc., and potentially incapacity. And then maybe a shareholders agreement as well. And we'll be releasing some shareholders agreements on like your docs over the next few weeks. But we have released our buy-sell option agreement today. And again, if you've got insurance coverage there by one of the shareholders over the other one, there's options, so both call options and also put options, so that if it's a terminating event such as death, permanent incapacity, or potentially even a trauma can be written in, that effectively it's covered under this agreement. So for those of you who've got clients who are in businesses in partnership through a company, absolutely crucial to set up that buy-sell option as we speak now. Strategy 9, retirement accumulation account. Most of you are probably pretty well aware that 30 June 2017, as a consequence of the T-bar or the pension T-bar transfer balance account, essentially what happened there is that a lot of people had too much money in their pension side, and as a consequence of that, they had to commute it, and the tax office gave advice at that time to roll it back to the accumulation account, which wasn't a bad strategy, kept it all inside superannuation. The only danger that we've got around that is that by rolling it back to the accumulation suddenly meant all our income was taxed at 15%. So that's not too bad. The real issue though is that if we're the the couple standing inside that SMSF, so that our spouse has passed on, we've got that accumulation account, we die, and so it has to be passed to our legal personal representative. And really it's important. I saw an article this morning around binding death benefit nominations. I would say there's so many binding death benefit nominations are inappropriate in Australia. There's been a couple of cases on it. I think in Morgan's case, which deals with a solicitor who transferred his superannuation. And again, remember I said don't do this, but he transferred his superannuation to the trustee of his estate. It actually has to go to your legal personal representative and not to your estate at all. It must go to your legal personal representative under any binding death benefit nomination. Otherwise, it's null and void. Anyway, getting away from that one, on death, if the monies are paid out to our adults, either through the estate and it's a validly binding death benefit direction, or my preference is the SMSF will, which is a lot more structured, has 6 different bullet points there for interactions there. It's a great thing for advisors to use. From that one, then it may be better if we took that money out. Obviously, if it's on the accumulation side, our member dies, then the pension ceases at that time. Everything falls back into the accumulation account. That means that when we take our monies out of our SMSF, if we're winding it up, there's going to be capital gains tax consequences. And there's also obviously going to be tax consequences for the beneficiaries if they're non-dependent, so they're adult children. Now, when that's taken out, that could end up being quite significant taxes. The other thing that I would suggest is something maybe a bit better, particularly if they're more advanced in years, if they're over age 70 or 75, that we may want to withdraw the monies out of the accumulation account now. Obviously, it'll be tax-free, so we're getting rid of that double layer of death benefit taxes that may apply if they died yesterday. And we put that into a family protection trust, which essentially the only beneficiaries of that are going to be bloodline or lineage. Now, with that one, they'll settle it with the amount that's put out of that accumulation account. They'll still live off their pension income and their pension side, but effectively what we'll have is that money will now come out and can be distributed amongst, obviously, family or beneficiaries, or we can lend that money out. And again, the same thing, the good thing about lending money out to our grandchildren or our children is that now that money, like the protector I talked about, that now means that in the event of divorce, monies will actually be owed to the family protection trust and will sit outside the assets of the fund. So it's not a bad idea, particularly if we have a look at what COVID is doing to all of us in terms of our finances. So have a look at that. Again, the retirement accumulation account, maybe setting up into a family protection trust, which I see is really good. Now, my final one, strategy 10, I'm sure there's a whole lot more strategies I can do. Watch SMSFs get smashed with taxes. The government's going to be spending at least $1 trillion bailing out the economy, and I think this is only just a start. I think there's going to be at least another 500 billion to $1 trillion. So suddenly we've gone from very low borrowings to really high. Now we're obviously not spending $6 trillion like the US, but with that and also the government, it'll be interesting to see whether the government bails out Virgin. I notice over in the US, the Federal Reserve actually has guaranteed all corporate bonds. Can you believe that one? A lot of fun that would be. But I think the main one there is at some point in time when we get out of this, someone is going to have to pay for all the expenses. And unfortunately, the monies are going out now. At some point in time down the track, we're going to have to repay it, otherwise lose our AAA credit rating. And who knows what credit ratings are at the moment. So where's the money going to come from? Again, it's going to be from probably, I would say, self-managed superannuation funds. At the moment, there's $750 billion, although that's obviously been impacted a bit by the reduction in equity values, commercial and residential. Who knows what's happening there? So it probably has dropped down to maybe 650 billion, but that's too much of a honeypot to go. So this is what I would say. I believe the pension tax exemption will go, which is not a bad idea, because then it just means the whole fund will end up being an accumulation account. It was originally promoted some years ago that there would be a reduction of the pension account for a flat rate tax of 10% inside of SMSF. And I would say that probably most of us would agree with that one. Then we don't have to worry about pension withdrawals on a year-by-year basis. The other one is refundable franking credits. Well, I would say, first off, I think they're going to be looking at franking credits per se anyway, and they may well get rid of franking credits. But definitely refundable franking credits will go, and you see Wilson HTM already starting to get up and down that bandwagon, but it's going to be very, very hard to argue not to knock out those refundable franking credits when everyone else is bearing pain. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to end up like the large superannuation funds, where the annual fees we're already starting to see with the SMSFs, and they will continue to grow up. The good side of the SMSFs from the other perspective is that once we get over this hump, that we will get the 35, 40, 45-year-olds who have seen the smashing by the industry funds and retail funds. I mean, if we have a look at, I'm just getting my calculator out. I haven't got my trusty Sally next to me, so she's my personal calculator. She's a very good one. If we go out and we have a look at my calculator. Okay, so if we have 9, and you guys are probably laughing at me because you probably know, if we have 9 million times 20,000, whether that's the case. Ooh, okay, so that is going to be $180 billion coming out of potentially out of the market, and maybe even more if we use that 10,000 before 30 June and $10,000 afterwards. If we do that, that's actually going to smash the industry and also the retail funds. You can find a lot more out of that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens around that stage. When I did my 2-day conference up at the Novotel up here at Sunshine Coast, we were streamed out to like 50 people. We had 5 people in a room of 100, so it was definitely a lot of plenty of space in between each of us. Everyone had their own table, so lots of social distancing. But importantly, out of that process, we were building investment strategies for SMSFs and going through the process of building investment strategies according to Commissioner's guidelines that were issued on the 17th of February 2020. And so I pulled up Host Plus. Dean Hutchins, a good mate of mine, pulled up Host Plus, and we looked at their balanced investment strategy, went through, and they had amazingly something like about 40% in unlisted assets, and they were running a 0 cash balance. So they had their cash investment strategy was between 0 to 10, and they were running a 0% cash balance. Can you believe this is Host Plus? So a bit of hubris. And remember, actually I saw it was quite a funny situation the other day. the funny situation was the industry-based funds were actually arguing that for self-managed super funds it's not fair because they run higher cash balances than the industry funds. So how can they even be in this position? Now, I've got a couple of little questions here, so let's go through. Matt Salisbury, great idea. I would say that directors' loans add to the PPSR. Remember the SMSF loan I talked about before. You can, if it's secured on property, again, get that mortgage done. What we're doing with our protector strategy and those ones, we will be providing a documentation that it can be registered up in Queensland. If you've got a property that's registered to the bank, you don't need to tell the bank that there's a second mortgage on that one. Obviously, it's ideal, but it's not required under law. So wherever you've got directors' loans or any loan and you want it shielded, particularly from litigation coming down the track, because we don't know what we don't know, get it onto PPSR. So that's a really good strategy, Matt. Again, that's my strategy 11. We'll put that, Matt, it's coming as it's coming on the side there. Tech, how do you execute a family protection trust with the bloodline beneficiaries? Essentially, I'll send you through tech. I'll go through the process of showing you the protector, but we've actually got up on our site what's called the leading member trust, which I'll probably call it. I might change it to a family protection for some of those ones, but I'll send you through the protector. A video I did with Tim Munro, and we go through the process of obviously setting up the family protection trust, doing the gift, and then the beneficiaries. How do we do that? So if you see it in practice, it's going to be really good for you there. Chris Hayworth has got tax changes. Will the tax changes be done for all super funds? Absolutely. So I would say that super is going to obviously have to pay the piper as we go down the track. And as I said before, I got lost there. I was getting too excited about the industry funds losing all that money. But the other side is that will create a severe depletion. We're going to find a lot of people are going to notice. And a lot of money is, or their account balances, if you think, remember what happened 2008, 2009, 2010, we had a huge influx from superannuation because people were still putting SGC in, they were still finding their balances going backward at the end of the day because they were losing money. So I would say this is like 10 times GFC. So I would say it's going to be a good uptick for that next generation, not baby boomers. We're already in our SMSFs for that next generation coming through. But any tax changes will generally be to super fund together. So question from Catherine, for the buy-sell, does the insurance policy taken out need to be company owned or personally owned? If it's personally owned over the other shareholders, it just makes it a lot easier because you've got the cashola to exercise the option, as opposed to if it's in a company and the money's stuck in the company, so it's a key man insurance policy, then you've actually got to get it out. Now you can do that. Generally the buy-sell, it's probably going to be more of a director's issue where there's going to be a buyback of one of the founding shareholders' shares in the event of death. So it's probably not necessarily going to be buy-sell. It's going to be a different buyback issue or cancellation of their shares. But again, at Abbott-Family, we can help you out with that one if need be. But a really good question. So Manish, I'll send you all the guys a protector video with that I did with Tim, and what we'll do is I'll send you all of this stuff, so expect that this afternoon. So yeah, everything will be Nutty. The recording will be out today. I'll give you a whole list of things because again, just going back to what we're saying today. Look, I'll just take you back to my first one. There you go. Love it, High Court. Good on you, dudes. When we go back is, look, this is time. It's hard with a lot of stuff going on around us. This is our time to really shine and show our professional. I've given you 10 strategies. Matt just came in with another strategy. There's so much we can do. And remember, it's not where we are now. It's the fallout of what's coming down the track. And history will tell you, you remember, if you went back to 2002, 2007, 2008, remember the GFC, what you were doing there? Now, that was a really slow burn. This one has been like, this is virtually a tsunami. This is an economic business tsunami that's travelled and trampled across Australia's economy, impacting absolutely everyone. So, you know, from that perspective, if you remember all the fallout that happened after the GFC, we're going to have the same thing again here, and there's going to be litigation coming on down the track. Some companies will survive. So can you imagine if you've got shares in Virgin at the moment? It's going to be a really tough one. And Mick Jeffries, he just went and tried to get his points vouchers to try and use it to buy grog and all that sort of stuff. So watch out. We don't know which companies are going to go down, which ones aren't. Again, just use the protector. Use those things, those tools. They're all available up on Like Your Docs. It's not an expensive process. Use those to increase your revenue, and make sure you listen to Tim's session on Monday. It's a great COVID-19 session. Go on to Change GPS site, lock it in, and have a look, because all of this stuff it's great to do it for the client, and we want to help them. But here I'm going to give you the biggest hint. Absolutely biggest hint. You with me on this one? First off, clients haven't got money, but where they have got money is in super. Future governments will rape and pillage money from super. We've now got an opportunity to get early access, and it's not us, it's the tax office telling us they'll get early access for us. The other one, use the SMSF loans. Use it wherever we can. Charge fees, charge fees, try and lock as much as you can up in superannuation, do your SMSF loans, because that's where clients will pay. Will pay from there because it's coming out of the super. Anyway, it's now the end, and thank you very much for telling. Let me get this recording rocking and rolling. If you've been registered, get your CPD point. What a way to spend a CPD. Just keep your chin up. Remember, we're the rock for our families and our clients. It's time, and if you've got a mate who's got the black dog where you can see them going down, really support them heavily, because we're all in this together. Look, we've lived through world wars. I didn't, but we've all lived through world wars. We're going to get through this scenario. Anyway, it's Grant Abbott, signing off.